Well, we're back on the live stream on the Poets and Quants website. Welcome everybody back to Centre Court MBA Festival. We've already had a couple of admissions panels with some of the top schools. And this is our second careers panel, and it's the East Coast plus, and that East Coast stretches all the way to Madrid. And it's great to have Matthew Davis with us from IE Business School. Matthew is the Associate Director of Talent and Careers. I think, Matthew, that you're currently in New Orleans, right?
Yes, I'm part of the North America team. So normally New York, but we have offices in Miami, Los Angeles, and Toronto as well.
Great. Well, you'll be speaking to a very global audience. We're also joined by Ellen Herman. Ellen is the Associate Director of Career Advising at Fordham, who's taken the very smart move to stand up for some of those Zooms. We've been spending so much time online recently. So if we see you pacing, Ellen, we know that you're thinking deeply about the next...
Thinking deeply. It's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's our pleasure. Abigail Keith from New Haven. Abigail is the Assistant Dean of Career Development at Yale's School of Management. Abigail, we hope that connection of yours is solid. And
yeah, luckily it wasn't the connection at all. It was actually Zoom. So hopefully
good.
Zoom is going to stick with us.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot more upgrades from Zoom. Obviously, you know, they've had to up their game in the last 6-7 months. We're also joined by Steve Rakas from CMU and the Tepper School. Steve is the Executive Director of the Masters Career Center. And David Capaldi, who is the Careers Director at Cornell and the Johnson School. So thank you to all 5 of you. As I mentioned earlier, the careers panels that we've integrated into the Centre Court Festival have been wildly popular. You know, don't tell this, of course, to your colleagues in admissions, but you really are a group of people that future applicants to business school really want to hear from, and of course get a sense of the sort of opportunities, the networks, the soft skills that MBA students are developing during their time at your business schools. We were going to start perhaps with a look at the graduating class of 2020. It's not the first time that an MBA cohort has come back into a tough job market. 2002, 2009, hell, I can even remember times in the early 1990s. I'm not supposed to admit that, but it has been a tough market. Ellen, from your perspective at Fordham, what does the summer look like for your graduates? You know, what are some of the sectors that are hiring, and perhaps even the timeframes that they're then indicating for the offers they've made?
Right. So in terms of the class of 2020, so COVID for us really got started in March. So typically, you know, those students with programmatic summer internships from 2019 converted their summer internships to full-time offers. We didn't see a lot of rescission of full-time offers. Luckily, fingers crossed, there was some changes to internships for summer 2020. But by the time kind of March, April rolled around, most people unrelated to COVID that were going to get jobs and offers had them. So there wasn't really a huge impact. I would say there was a larger impact for us on the internships, which are typically 10 weeks and got shortened and went to virtual. And honestly, a few were rescinded because companies were scrambling.
Sure,
So.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's very encouraging, you know, for this graduating class that you know, the talents and that companies saw in them, they really want to hold on to that top talent. Is that something, David, that you've seen at Cornell as well for this graduating class?
Yeah, I think very similar. I would say, you know, a couple other points to make. I mean, we did see with a lot of the consulting firms, some of them push back start dates. So we had a lot of consulting students that, you know, thought they were going to be starting in July and August, and some of those have been pushed as far as January. So we've been working with some of the recent grads, sort of trying to piecemeal some projects and just some things together to sort of fill the time that they didn't think they were going to have. And then I would say, you know, similar to Fordham, you know, because of the internship conversions, we were in really good shape. The only other group I think that saw their search stretched a little bit were, you know, some of the tech students that were looking at some just-in-time kind of hiring, that in that March, April, which is when they thought things were going to happen, that got pushed into the, you know, later summer. But I would say, you know, by the time summer really did roll around, I mean, really, we ended up, you know, in really good shape.
Right, and in terms of industries, consulting, healthcare, supply chain, which were those sectors that were showing the biggest appetite?
Yeah, so we saw, I would say, tech certainly was strong for us as I imagine it is at many business schools in 2020. I would say, others being consulting and financial services continue to be really strong in terms of placement.
Right. Abigail, does it feel different from previous years? Someone on a previous careers panel sort of said, well, back in 2009, that things really did shut down and, certain sectors that stopped hiring. What have you been seeing for Yale graduates this summer?
I would say our graduates have done amazingly well, but similarly, I think a lot of them had offers already and they stuck. There are always students of ours who are looking through the late spring and early summer, and I'd say that slowed down, and they continued to get offers throughout the summer though. And across industries, I'd say the only industry for us that, I experienced this very differently than I experienced in 2009 when I was working with students then. Things really did shut down then in certain sectors in big sectors. And I'd say now really the only places, and they're not places that we have huge numbers of SLM students go to, that have really been hit hard are hospitality and media and entertainment. And even media and entertainment, it's pieces of media and entertainment. There are some pieces that are more on the tech side that have not been hit in the same way. But I'd say for us, those are sectors that some of our students are interested in, but definitely not the volume that go into consulting or financial services or technology or many other things.
Right. Matthew is one of the top European business schools. IE attracts a very international audience into Madrid. But your own role and working with the US team reflects how you're then looking to support them in their career steps all around the world. I mean, is it a very different picture as you break it down geographically, both for the US market and Europe?
I think there's a difference that we see here, and I think it's because there's a real diversity of profiles that we get from the US and Canadian market that I cover in terms of who's going to IE. I think people are looking sort of for an adventure by going to school in Europe. They're looking for, an experience on top of the education. And so the people from our market who come out of IE are often looking for, really different sorts of careers. Whereas in Europe, it's very typical that we get, an across the board business school profile focused on finance and consulting and, so forth. In the US, there actually are a lot of people heading into really unique areas, whether it's, global affairs or entrepreneurship or education, or, people have very diverse stories. So we sort of have a different profile from this region than we see, in Europe, where we're a local school.
Right. I guess any crisis is an opportunity for an entrepreneur. Some perspective, I guess, on the pandemic, Steve, is that, tech has had a good pandemic. Tepper looks at that relationship between business and technology. Has that sort of followed through in terms of this graduating class and opportunities they've had?
So speaking for the class of 2020, as my colleagues had said, it was, the timing worked in our favor, right? A lot of structured recruiting had passed, and then we normally look for a second wave of more just-in-time recruiting in the spring and summer. And while that was there, it was not as strong as we'd seen in the past. It was more piecemeal, I think, company by company. But certainly tech is poised to, be doing very well right now, which it is. We haven't seen it diminish there. But it did take some folks who didn't have something full-time lined up and thought they would follow the just-in-time market. I think they had to put a little more effort into it than their classmates for the past few years. But by the time we got to the end of where we tracked data, we were pretty happy with where we ended up.
Right. Now, of course, many of our viewers that are watching the admissions panels at Centre Court, they're hoping, I guess, to start their MBA in the fall of next year. So then we'd be projecting, I don't know, the job markets of 2023 and beyond. And hopefully, the world is back on its feet by then. But you already have insights, Ellen. You were talking about those summer interns and, of course, the opportunities next year. GMAC has put out a corporate recruiter survey very recently that is actually quite bullish. Recruiters talking about their hiring plans for next year. If they didn't have, or they had shortened internship opportunities, how will that then sort of shape and fashion the second year of the MBA at Fordham? and what they will then be looking at next year?
Yeah, so our class of 2021 that completed their internships, I would say just like in normal years, the programmatic offers have converted. So they're in pretty good shape. I would say the ones that, and I've been with Fordham for 6 years before I came from financial services where I was a banker. Basically, year in, year out, good years, bad years. If you're in a program, it's yours to lose. And it converts kind of in, companies, global companies, financial services, marketing companies, tech companies, consulting companies, they need to keep replenishing their lower talent pool, for their future leadership. And so I'm seeing that things look good. I would be equally bullish where I have students now, just going a year out that are interviewing. Some are close to offers already. Again, mainly for programmatic versus just in time. So I would say programmatic hiring continues to be robust. And I think, I would be bullish on that.
Right. Abigail, we've all been watching so much Netflix that even that entertainment sector, there's certainly demand there. But as you say, it tends to be tech within that sector. Does as your students look at their longer term plans, are there sort of two phases of a discussion? Here's the position coming out of business school, how you need to adapt, look at who's hiring, opportunities, skill sets, but always place that within the context of their longer term goals?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that, certainly a lot of Yale SWM students follow a lot of the structured hiring processes, whether it's for, internships in consulting or large financial services or large other kinds of technology companies that then lead toward doing internships and then to full-time offers. Many of our students, actually most of our students in most years, come up with much more indirect paths than that by their own choosing. And really, I think one of the things that makes SM a really fun place to lead a career office is that our students have so many different kinds of interests and things related to sustainability or to energy or to impact, whether that's impact investing or just corporate responsibility, or whether for-profit, nonprofit, in so many different ways. And so a lot of it depends on really, one of the things that we strive to do is make sure that we're supporting the student for their goals, their goals. And sometimes that's really going to one of those structured programs, and that's going to lead them there. And sometimes it's not. And so a lot of it is, our office in some ways is always wearing many hats. One is to make sure that we have as many opportunities available to our students as possible. And the other is making sure that we're really supporting our students and giving them as many resources for them to really identify what's the right opportunity for them, because it is not necessarily the right opportunity for any of their other classmates.
Right. With applications that sort of say, so, what's the role that business school going to play? Where do you see yourself coming out of IE or any other top school? If we match, Matthew, what an applicant says about their post-MBA career goals, and then the paths that they take. I mean, this is an extraordinary year of discovery, learning things about yourself, skill sets you may not realize that you've had. I mean, do you very often see that disconnect between what they thought they might want to do and the path they then take?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We always see people who come in and find out from their classmate that there are jobs out there that they've never even heard of, that they then want to explore more. They start on a project in one of the entrepreneurship classes, and never having thought about starting a business, they end up with an incorporated and operating concern by the time they leave. As a career center, I mean, we always love to see the people who come in and say, I really want to go into finance, and that's why I'm showing up on day one with this list of the programs that I'm hoping to get into, and I've started networking in this city and in this market, and I have 8 years of experience doing this already. But realistically, I think people always find stuff that they didn't expect, and we love to help them on that journey. See where they end up.
I mean, even within bigger fields, Ellen was talking about her background as a banker in finance. I mean, if we look at technology, Steve, that's a big basket. That's a sector. Technology is touching virtually every other sector in its influence. Do you then find, both as a team, a career services team at Tepper, and then in the discussions that you have with graduates, that that they sort of narrow down and say, well, within technology, I'd be interested in these sort of roles. It's not just product manager at Amazon, and they really start to drill down?
Yeah, I think it's important to have those conversations early on, just to, as some of my colleagues have said, introduce them to roles in tech they might not known have existed. Product manager is very well known. Maybe product marketing manager is also a good fit for someone, or program manager, whatever it may be. So there's that. And then, as you said, tech is not only just tech anymore. Every company can be a tech company. Look at all the technology on a Boeing plane. Look at all the technology in all the wearable health management devices we use, right? So we have those conversations with students, and luckily at Carnegie Mellon, there's a real spirit of cross-disciplinary communication and research for the students to be able to engage with other parts of the university. So they really have so many opportunities to explore areas they might never have considered before, right? So we do absolutely, there's always the basics of hardware, software, right? Things like that, social media, but then also, again, what industries are really becoming technology driven as well, in addition to the classic tech that we think of.
Right. David, we've been discussing how what an applicant might share in terms of their post-Cornell MBA goals, and then the path that they actually take. Do you have a sort of a strong dialogue with your colleagues in admissions, to look at those backgrounds, the pre-MBA experience that they have, where they might see themselves coming out of Cornell, just as a reality check, and sort of say, yep, we could successfully see them making that sort of transition?
For the most part, and sorry about that, my power flicked off, so I got thrown off. For the most part, yes. I mean, I would say, for your sort of plain vanilla kind of applicant, not necessarily, but I think for ones where maybe they're looking to make a major career switch, certainly they do loop us in. I think, from what I have found too, it's really important to get someone on the career side involved in the interview process if it's someone that we have questions about, because I feel like we have so many students, and I'm sure this is common across schools, where they'll write these essays and they'll give these indications of what they want to do, and it turns out when they arrive on campus it's completely different from what their application says. So I think for people that we're really questioning, to make sure that someone on the career side is involved in having a conversation with the applicant.
Right. Well, it is a tough market, and Ellen, of course, you've seen classes that have come through. They've made this investment in themselves. Do you still fundamentally believe that whatever those market conditions, that you're better off with an MBA from a top school?
Absolutely. Companies are interested in top talent, as I said before, and there's no better way to get that than through an MBA. You develop a whole nother network of classmates. It's just a fantastic experience during the 2 years. I just can't say enough about it. I mean, your classmates are future industry leaders in areas that hopefully, you'll remain in touch with them for decades throughout your business or marketing or tech career. So I think that the benefits of it sometimes aren't even realized by students, not just in terms of networking with alums from that school, but just in terms of your future classmates, your current classmates. So I can't say enough about the benefit of an MBA, and employer hiring bears that out. So I think we're all in agreement. Get your MBA.
You allude to that network, and I guess, Abigail, this is something you see. I mean, do you actually have graduates that reach out and say, hey, I'm now in this position, or this stage of my career, we're hiring? Are they very proactive and looking for ways to help?
Yes, and I'd say they're Yale graduates, both from broader Yale as well as from SOM, reach out to us. Especially across industries where they may be specialists in healthcare, but they need people who have business skills. And so they'll reach out to SOM versus the School of Public Health, or both. But there's really, I think, across the board. And that's something that I think is really increased a lot the past 6 months. We've always heard from alumni. We've always reached out to alumni, and I feel like they're coming out of the woodworks really proactively in a really, really inspiring way, that there's like, oh, I want to hire people. What do I do? How can I connect with them? How can I make sure that they really understand how great this opportunity is? So I think that there's so much to that connection and being a part of such a larger community of people who are leaders in all sorts of organizations globally.
Right. From New York, Pittsburgh, New Haven, and Ithaca, all of you also have this, tremendous regional, national, and even global reach. Perhaps for IE again with such an international network. I mean, do you see graduates from the school, Matthew? They have this innate sense of mobility that they've already, decided to come to Spain. For their MBA experience, and does that stay with them in sort of saying, well, I'm not limited to this market, I'm looking globally?
Yes, absolutely. And we see people move all over the world, both, immediately after their program and, throughout their career, maybe years after they've completed a degree. So people definitely move. It's omnidirectional. I mean, whether it's from the US to the Middle East or the Middle East to Latin America or Latin America to Europe, I mean, people are going in every different direction. And what's great about our network, I think it's similar to what Abigail said, it's people are really eager to help. And because IE is such a global community, anywhere you go, you're going to find not just one, but multiple people who are in leadership roles or in really interesting companies or who own their companies that are going to be interested in introducing you to people, hiring you, helping you establish a market, beachhead. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we see. We're doing an event tomorrow on global mobility in your career. So I mean, it's something we see that's all alumni speaking about their moves and why they hire across borders. So yeah, it's a major part of the experience.
David, will there be a sort of a badge of honor? I was the Cornell class of 2020. We came out into a pandemic, a global downturn. I mean, what are the qualities, the characteristics that you would encourage in them, but even that recruiters are then identifying, this sort of adaptability or grit? I don't know, how would you describe the sort of resilience of this class and how recruiters might admire that?
Yeah, I think it'll be, I think they were certainly adaptable and had to, you think in the middle of the semester, they, left from, went from being live in person, getting together and socializing to all of a sudden sort of, many stayed in Ithaca, but they sort of, some of them scattered across the globe and, continue doing classes and continue to help some of their friends that were still looking for jobs and help first years that were, some of them still recruiting and, keeping in touch with their companies and so forth. So I think, very resilient group of people. And I think, especially adapting to this remote world that, we don't know how long it'll be with us, but I think they all, did it quite well. And, I'm sure it'll pay off, going forward.
Right. We don't know how long this will be with us. And the new normal will look nothing like the old normal. Does that mean, Steve, that there are skill sets, how you network virtually, how you interview virtually, that you're now developing and ensuring that the graduating class and incoming students are all developing?
Yes, absolutely. We, went from a situation where we've already seen some recruiting moving to virtual, right, in the past few years. But certainly those companies that had the mindset of wanting to maintain that on-campus presence for whatever reason, they were sort of left in the lurch here, right? I mean, there's a list of companies that are always going to attract many applicants, whether they come to our campuses or not, right? But for those other companies, there's a challenge now. And for the students as well, I mean, I think we would all agree this generation is extremely tech savvy, but having to move to a complete remote platform for learning, for interviewing, for recruiting, there was a quick ramp up period, and probably our second year students who had to find their internship in the spring are a lot more comfortable moving into virtual recruiting than their classmates who locked things down in the fall before all this happened. So we're making sure that we're there to support those students. And we're not in our career center right now, but we're actually, I saw an email pop up that I put aside to read later from our head of computing. We're going to be equipping our interview suites as much as we can to have students come in and plug in and have good lighting, good speakers, good connection to help them through this. But you're right, they have fewer opportunities to make a good impression than they would have in the past.
And your interaction is changing with them too. I mean, Abigail, to sort of sit down with candidates, whether it's preparing interview skills or 360-degree reviews. We've talked a lot about how classes have shifted online. and you know, the continuing education, but you know, the magic of the coaching and guidance that you're providing. How's that been affected? And perhaps, you know, to Steve's point of this incoming class, they're used to it already. Has it been fairly seamless?
It has been actually rather seamless. You know, I think in some ways it's really, we took advantage of the situation in the spring, and in part out of necessity to make it work for my team, who was home often with young kids or elderly parents or other, you know, responsibilities. And how do we split up a day so it works for our team and for the students across time zones? And so we immediately started having, you know, 6 a.m. appointments available to them and 9 p.m. appointments available to them. And the people taking them were the ones who it was working in their lives too. And the students were taking us up on it immediately. So I think that flexibility really worked to build those relationships where, yes, we don't get to meet with, you know, pass them in the hall casually and check in on them. But I think meeting them at giving them flexibility of times where, on the one hand, it sounds very simple, really, I think did a lot to really build trust and also just build those relationships and give them the time to carve out, okay, they're in front of screens all day. They often need a break on one side or the other. So instead of just plugging us into the middle, just so it worked in a traditional day, why not do it somewhere that they could focus on it more and we could focus on them in a better way? And so I think that actually went far, and that's how we've done all of our programming since then in terms of workshops. We've had it across different times for, you know, to accommodate different time zones and also different preferences, and to hopefully minimize the screen fatigue that our students have, knowing that that's very real. And, you know, we want to be giving them as much support as possible. And we also know that it's a lot of time in front of a computer, no matter what they're doing. So we've been trying to make things as interactive as possible and giving them as much flexibility as we can.
Right. Now, Centre Court viewers have heard me say this before, but you know, my belief, I speak to many thousands of MBA applicants every year, and they will talk about perhaps a particular class, a particular club, even a particular trip or semester experience that is included. But I feel that you are this hidden gem. You are this magic box of careers, not just for some of the extraordinary outcomes that people go on to achieve, but the sort of guidance, the soft skills. David, how does this work? You know, there are all of these courses on discounted cash flow and, you know, hard quant skills, but how are you then delivering some of the soft skills that will serve them so well in their career development?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it gets down to, you know, getting to know students on an individual basis and having that, you know, certainly we encourage, you know, almost require every, you know, student coming into the program to have a one-on-one meeting with a career advisor so that we can walk through, you know, what are they really interested in? And I think that in those conversations, you know, and as you talk to people about sort of what are your, you know, longer term goals and what are you looking for in a career, you know, what someone says they want to do. And as you listen to some of the things that they say and after a series of questions may be completely different. And I think it, you know, can spark some ideas and, you know, it often then goes from there. And I think then, you know, just sort of continuing into, you know, students get involved in small career work groups that we call them, where they're second year coaches that work with first years and career advisors that then do a series of, you know, different skill set programming and sort of overseeing some of the career work groups that take place, you know, really throughout the whole first semester.
Right. And Ellen, with what you love about your work, are there certain modules that you're then sharing with students that for them are this sort of aha moment? You know, that they've of course come to business school for the skill sets and other things, but you know, there's this mirror that you're holding up to. What is that aha moment?
So I would lump them in 2 different areas. So behaviorally, I think there's definitely an aha moment for students when they begin to feel comfortable with talking about themselves. For many of them, it's not really something that they spend a lot of time in their junior roles pre-MBA. So talking about themselves, really showcasing themselves. So I think there's definitely an aha moment for students when they begin to get really comfortable. I won't say bragging about themselves, but speaking about themselves at the MBA level. And I would say, again, just because I came from finance and that's kind of the particular subset of students that I focus in on, maybe there's something that they're not grasping or they're a career changer. And so how do you really talk about your understanding of finance skills or marketing skills when you were doing something completely different. I'll try to use a parallel example or something that wouldn't necessarily come up in class, but that a recruiter would be very focused on. You know, MBAs can learn, they're all bright, they can learn new things quickly. Do they understand the concepts? How do they communicate the relevance of what they're analyzing or looking at in terms of actionable business items? So that's the aha moment for me with students, behaviorally speaking about themselves and then understanding how they can communicate, you know, their understanding of the concepts in the business setting rather than just the academic theory.
Right. Perhaps in Spanish, it's an ole moment rather than aha moment, Matthew. But there's also that international component, and I think what that can bring, immersion and what you're learning about yourself. This is all condensed into one very intensive year. What do you see as an aha moment as at IE?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the intensive. And I think part of the learning process at IE that's so important is the group work. And because it's so intensive, it's a very fast program. There's a tremendous workload. It's pretty much impossible to do all the work. And you have to, at a certain point in your group, identify what you want to do, what you can convince your group to let you do, what you need to let someone else handle. And that understanding of your strengths, your teammates' strengths, and your respective weaknesses or, you know, areas where it's like, okay, I need to spend the time learning on this and you should let me do it, or I'm never going to do this and we need the grade and someone else on the team has to take charge. And understanding when to delegate and when to hand off something or hold on to it. I think that is a real aha moment, you know, over the course of an IE MBA that gets people like really, that comes in handy in the real world and, you know, pretty quickly.
Right, right. Do you see, Steve, that this real evolution and difference between, you know, there's first year incoming students and then is it when they come back from summer internships, like, wow, something's changed? Is there a sort of a clear point of evolution? I'm sure different for different people.
Yes, we do see a lot of growth over the summer often. Just that short break from the structure they've gotten used to, the classroom environment, and then being thrown into a situation where you have a short amount of time to make a good impression. Really, we call it the 2 or 3 month interview, right? So I mean, there's that extent to that. We encourage all of our students to try to leave your internship with an offer. Whether or not you want to take it is a different conversation, right? Because then you've proven that you've been able to successfully navigate that environment. If we're still talking about aha moments, though, I think the internship is part of that process where, I just find it amazing to see the transformations we see career-wise from people who often come in, as a first year with a certain career, want to make a transition and learn that this is one of the few environments at our schools where what you've done is not that critically important to what you want to do. It's being able to package those transferable skills, network appropriately, and make that move to that new career. So the internship is a huge part of that. But I mean, I think most of our full-time students across our schools are career changers. So we see some amazing transformations over 2 years.
Right. Abigail, if I say expectation management, I don't know what that sort of resonates with you, but presumably there are sometimes some more difficult conversations or just helping to open up people's thinking to different alternatives and opportunities.
I think the hardest way that comes into play is the students' expectations of themselves. They think that they can attend everything and do everything and be, get straight A's in every class and go to every employer event and go to every club event. And I think, one of the most valuable things that we, both as career offices or any administrators or faculty can do is just burst that bubble. It's impossible. There's always, at all of our schools, there is way more to participate in and to experience than any human being physically possibly ever could. And I think one of the hardest things for students to let go of is the idea that they're going to get to do all of it. You're going to get to do a lot. And you do need to pick your spots and prioritize, because if you have that expectation of yourself, it all starts going really downhill really fast because it's just not physically possible. And I think that anything else about expectations for me just falls into that, because that plays into how people are exploring their careers or how people are participating in classes or in extracurriculars. And really, it's that overarching, our students are all extremely successful and they've had a lifetime of success. That's what's gotten them here. And I hope that they all continue to be successful. And most of the time they all do continue to be successful. Part of that though is also, you know, that they're used to being able to take on everything. And, you know, certainly the environment that exists in business school these days, it's impossible for anybody. There are too many competing events and too many competing really important things for people to focus on. And I think that forces people to make what are sometimes some hard choices and also then become some of the greatest gifts, because that out of that comes a lot of clarity.
Right. Now, that speaks to the intensity that Matthew was describing. David, Abigail talks about these high achievers. They're ambitious in everything that they want to be involved with, the enthusiasm that goes hand in hand with that. But often when I talk to students or alumni, they would identify almost a sense of an imposter syndrome. And with all of the efforts that your schools are making in terms of diversity and inclusion, how do you then accompany the individual that was anxious? I wasn't sure that I would fit into this high achieving group and that there was a place for me. Do you see those sort of cases from time to time?
Yeah, from time to time. And I think, the best way to help those students is really encouraging them to have as many conversations with, particularly with some alumni that, we know that are, very friendly and supportive, and really, and even in different industries. I mean, sometimes I think some of those students often, they'll say they want to be a consultant or a banker because that's what everyone else is doing, right? And so they can sort of fall into that trap. And I think, really trying to have some candid conversations with the right people at different firms. And often it's going to be like a recent grad or maybe a second year that, just spent a summer at one of those firms, and making sure that you can have those candid conversations.
Right. Ellen, do you think things will go back to the way they were in as much as, recruiters and their sort of target campuses, geographies, but now, of course, everything has moved virtual and there are no boundaries anymore. There's a silver lining, opportunities to connect with people that are no longer based on radiuses and distances to a school campus. Do you think that we'll learn from that and that recruiting will change because of this year?
I think virtual is here to stay. So regardless of the vaccine showing up tomorrow, and I hope it does, it's just here to stay. So I think that the notion of reporting to your office in your office tower or office campus is just gone by the wayside. It's upended the real estate and hospitality industry, as Abigail said, and there are no borders. So companies are going to continue to have remote jobs, remote opportunities, and they're going to look at their fixed cost structure and determine what real estate they really need to own or not own. And so I think that's going to drive their business decisions. And I know that we've had conversations with students where we've said to them, all the jobs are remote. What's the difference if it's in Spain or Modesto, California, or Canada? Go for it. So there are no more borders. So I think it's just a great opportunity for MBAs, even though it's a shift. I think that once you kind of wrap your head around it, it's a bigger opportunity for you because you might have been closed off to a market. So I think that's gone by the wayside.
Right. So for the incoming class, even the 26, 27-year-olds that do spend their life digitally, who's playing catch up here? Is it the schools and the students, or is it recruiters? Are recruiters equipped for this new normal that Ellen was describing? Was
that for me? Because you kind of broke up in the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I didn't want to jump in if it wasn't for me. It's interesting. I think what I've seen in a short amount of time, I mean, if we look back 5 years from now, this will be a short amount of time we've had to ramp up. I think we had an issue with some students mourning the loss of what they had and being a little resistant to technology, which was shocking in some ways, right? Kind of everything going virtual. Some companies certainly have reconsidered some of the technologies that they've invested in. Let's put it that way. I think we've seen that too. Some of the recent large MBA career fairs have not gone as well as would like. So, but in general, I think we all have to accept this is the new normal we're in. We're all going to get there in our own time. But thinking about your previous question, to me, the driver of how this impacts long-term is really in the hands of the companies, right? If companies who are based in really attractive, expensive areas will allow more staff to work in other areas, that's going to have an impact. And if the companies we all know and love that aren't in great areas and it's really hard to get students to go there, if they're more flexible and let people work remotely, I think we're going to see a shift in a short period of time.
Can I just jump in on a different side of the question?
Please, Abigail.
No, I agree with all of that. I think I also, just in terms of how it may or may not long-term shift the actual recruiting process is what's been really interesting to me and my team, and asking recruiters and sort of what do they anticipate. Is there even, I think there's so many advantages, but also I think how we got here was COVID and everything shutting down. And in many ways, things were moving in this direction anyway for very different reasons. Many large companies were really grappling with how do we actually attract a broader, more diverse workforce, and how do we actually attract people from different schools or different backgrounds, different areas. And so having everything virtual solves in many ways that access problem in a very different way. And so it just happened to get accelerated, by exponentially, I would say, because of the current year. But I actually think it was moving in that direction anyhow, because to do that in that kind of broad way is extremely expensive, to have recruiting teams going to so many different schools and so many different times, and just the logistics alone would be a nightmare. And so I actually think that while I do think there will be some in-person recruiting activity that happens once it's possible, I think a lot of it is going to continue to be virtual for a long time. And I hope that it is, because I think it does open up a much more level playing field, regardless of student, but travel budgets and other things.
Right.
Perhaps
And
all at the very final stages of the process, I picture, right? I think the final round stages will probably still be on site once people can travel, but everything that leads to that, we've sort of proven it can be done differently.
Right. And all of this, of course, there's been a lot of focus there in those immediate positions that they will pursue coming out of the MBA. But I mean, David, you're always then watchful of saying, well, this is a stepping stone. And actually what we're working on with you is a longer term career vision. So there's the first position, but how it fits into, how do you then work with them? Do you continue to provide support, when they're 3, 4, 5 years out and interviewing for their second position?
We do. I mean, we have an alumni career services group. I think that they provide, I would call it probably more general coaching skills than, someone coming into school is trying to figure out what they want to do and what career, like there often has been talked about, career switchers from one path to another. So I think, the 5-year out or so alumni generally know what they want to do. It's more just the sort of general coaching, and some of them may be a little rusty in terms of interviewing and freshening up their resumes and so forth. So we do provide that kind of guidance.
Right. Everything that we've discussed, Matthew, IE also has a world-class online MBA program. Are the sort of the rules of the game for those students very, very different? I mean, many of them perhaps online, they're even continuing their studies, their professional positions and studying part-time. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very similar program. The idea is the same behind, the focus on group work, the focus on career preparation through, courses, education, and advising. So I don't think there's a tremendous difference between what's offered and, on campus and online. I do think that, in both cases, the networking is essential, and to making the most out of our alumni network and our global network or our local network, whatever your need is. I mean, that's going to be essential, and we encourage people to start doing that from day one. When you enter the program, start thinking about who the alumni are you want to connect with. So, but we definitely, I just want to add, we also offer alumni support, lifelong service. That's actually my role. That's why I wanted to say something. I mean, I really only start working with people as they are about to graduate, but primarily I work with alumni, and we have people, you know, in different offices around the world who are purely or largely alumni focused.
Right, it's a lifelong relationship. Ellen, you built a very successful career in finance. As you look at this generation, you know, perhaps pursuing a career in finance, consulting, tech, you know, the many areas that we've discussed, is there an added dimension with this group about a sense of purpose or wanting a meaningful career? Is that a dialogue that you have with students?
All the time, all the time. You know, it's funny, when I went to business school, it was talked about, but it certainly wasn't a dominant theme. Again, that was another century ago, so that was a long time ago, but we have that conversation all the time. They are really not interested in, you know, kind of the grind that I experienced as an analyst and an associate in banking. They're interested in something that's very purposeful, where they'll make a real contribution, and they're interested in sustainability, impact investing, ESG. So I have conversations, you know, with students about that all the time, regardless of financial services, you know, because there's that angle really in every industry. So that's definitely a dominant theme. Unrelated to that, the real dominant theme that I've seen this year was always important, but this year, more than ever, the first words out of recruiters' mouths to me are diversity. We're really looking for diversity talent. So that's really the big theme, more so than the students coming to me about sustainability or impact. Recruiters are really looking for that diverse talent pool.
Right, Abigail, similar sort of discussions about a meaningful career, but at the same time the echo of recruiters and their priorities around diversity and inclusion.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly recruiters have always been interested in diversity and inclusion. I think they're actually putting sort of their metal where their mouth is and doing more to really reach those goals. In terms of, you know, our students, they've always really asked themselves hard questions and gone off the beaten path. And I think that if anything, some of them might question like, oh, can I still do that? Do I still have the flexibility to turn down this, you know, big company name that I want for something else that might be more aligned with what, you know, and I think that they're always grappling with those questions, and I think that they continue to, but I don't think that's anything new. I think that's something that's very sort of ingrained in our community and culture at SOM. The other thing, sorry.
Please,
the other thing,
please,
I think, you know, the piece of that also is always something that I think sometimes gets overlooked by students as they start, is they think that they can't really care about purpose and become an investment banker or consultant. And as they really dive into, I'm just using those as examples because those are often the ones that are used in that kind of example. But as they dive into it, they realize that there are amazing ways to really care about the impact they're making and really connected to how they're contributing, and do it in some of those very traditional MBA roles. And I think one of the things that our students continue to uncover are all these ways of combining their skills and their interests and their values and trying to find where do they all fit together in the best way to leverage them the best.
Right. Yeah, a comment from one of your peers at MIT Sloan was saying, you know, finance will be behind solving some of the world's thorniest problems. So, you know, being able to have that sort of impact. David, we haven't spoken much perhaps about the international MBA students that come to Cornell. Obviously, it's a school recognized all over the world. Different sets of conditions. You know, this isn't a political platform, but as you look at H-1B and obviously the desire to consolidate the time that they've spent at Cornell, do they face a very different market, international students right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for the most part, I would say it generally is more challenging, and there are certainly some opportunities that are not available to, there are some companies that sort of flat out won't sponsor international students. I will say though that, you know, we do try to educate international students even from before they arrive on campus or wherever they're taking classes this year, so that they know sort of what the opportunities are, what the landscape is. we're a STEM program now, as I think many of the business schools are, so that, we're finding that helps a little bit, particularly with companies that continue to sponsor. I think it seems like that's helping more so than convincing a firm that didn't sponsor. But I think that, if you look at outcomes, our international students tend to do just about as well as US work authorized students. I would just say, if you especially if you talk to them, a lot of them will say it probably felt like a longer or harder journey, but they ended up getting the outcome and the goal that the reason they came to Cornell or any business school, they end up getting it. It just, it may be more interviews or more informationals that they had to do, or more, just networking that they needed to do to get what they got.
Right, a very consistent, Steve, in terms of what you're seeing for Tepper and international students.
I would agree in general. We've seen a tightening of the employer appetite to take the risk of hiring an international and then ultimately not being able to get them through the visa process, right? Going STEM, I think probably all of us, if not everyone, probably close, has done that. I think that alleviates the strain somewhat, but the kind of ongoing ambiguity, I hope, is resolved in the near term future. That, I think, is hurting the process for both employers and students more than anything else, not knowing what 3 months or 6 months from now will look like. So hopefully that's straightened out. But I would certainly echo, and I coach our students to say, keep doing all the right things. You might have to go through that flow chart more than a student who is domestic, but if you keep doing the right things in the right order, good things will happen. And, we do see that. But yeah, it's a ambiguous, uncertain situation in the short-term future.
Yeah, no, we use the term VUCA, I guess, a lot on business school campuses to describe the sort of uncertainties and ambiguities. But if we look at the 10-year return, Matthew, the enduring value of the MBA degree, ask graduates of the class of 2009, 2010, would they have done things differently? Everyone seems to feel that there's that long-term return. Is that something that you see with the alumni you connect with?
I think 99 out of 100 say it was the best year of their life, and they have no regrets about it, and they only wish they could go back and if they graduated in 2010, they're only upset that they can't make it to their reunion in Madrid this year. So I think everybody's real happy with the experience on a personal level. And I think professionally too. I mean, you see the growth that happens immediately, maybe not necessarily immediately after, like you say, the first job can be a stepping stone kind of role, but by the 10-year mark, I mean, the acceleration and in your advancement. I mean, I think that's something that all of us would say you get from a degree like this. Right.
Ellen, you're passionate about your work. Just perhaps a final thought as we close the webinar. Either illustrated through a student that you worked with, or what do you love most about your job? What are those moments that are just precious to you?
So really what I love is helping students get great outcomes. That's really what I love. That's what I'm here to do. And so, when they come by my office and say they've made it to the final round or the super day, and they come back, a week later and they got the offer, or they've converted their summer internship, we'll often laugh about those early days and that early anxiety about interviewing and which companies they should be targeting and how they can really differentiate themselves, on interviews. So I find that when students get the outcome that they want, I'm happiest. That's really what I'm here for. And I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of that.
Right, David, whether end of the day, end of the week, or end of that graduating class, they weren't wearing caps and gowns this year. It was all virtual, but the highlights of your job.
Yeah, so I think probably similar lines, but I think it's meeting that student day one or even before they arrive through the application process, and the ones that sort of struggle through getting the job but then ultimately get something and then convert that internship. I think that's really rewarding for the one that really had to fight for it and got it and was successful.
Right, your peers in admissions sometimes comment the individual that was on the wait list or was given a second chance, perhaps they reapplied, tend to then be among the most engaged, committed, and ultimately successful graduates of the school. Success is obviously measured in many different ways. Is that similar? You know, when you've really had to work hard to make that transition, to have that success, it then means that much more.
I think it does, because for some of them, they may have thought that, you know, for some, it could come down to like the last interview or two, and they think they're not going to be able to get what they really went to school for. And then so to actually get it, it just, you know, is really meaningful. And I think that they, you know, they really then tend to give back and help. I've seen them then helping, you know, as second years, then helping first years to prep and make sure that they're successful.
So Abigail, you know, in terms of being assistant dean of career development, when you're interviewing for your own team, people applying to positions to work in career development, and you say, you know what, you're going to get to do this, or you'll have this chance. You'll see. It's a magical moment. What might you then share in an interview like that?
You know, it's a very vulnerable position that students are in when they work with us, and it's a privilege to get to support people through some of their really for sometimes their personal choices, their personal preferences, what they discover about themselves, and to give another person that opportunity to really ask themselves some of those hard questions, or to ask them those hard questions yourself, and to let them have the space to answer them, and then figure out what actions to take to really achieve their goals is, personally, I think one of the greatest privileges I have in what I get to do.
Mm. Steve, you mentioned, you know, how little, of course, you needed to go onto this beautiful new business school campus that Tepper has invested in. When you do go back, what are the moments that you'll be looking forward to?
A good latte in the afternoon. But in addition to that, I think just those spontaneous moments where you run into a student or a group of students. Sometimes you have, you know, those quick 30-second hallway conversations can be that quick piece of advice that student needs that day to make something happen, or just, you know, being connected in that spontaneous way that this current environment just doesn't create. We're a small program, and so we pride ourselves on that. I do miss that a lot, and the good coffee.
I was going to say, if we go down the road of coffee and food, then Matthew's going to have his feet with some of those markets in Madrid. But Matthew, highlights of what you do?
Well, I do both careers and alumni work, and I have to say we're a smaller community in North America, and it's really, really fun when two people who didn't know each other and have a lot in common, either personally or professionally, when I can help make that connection. And I love helping them find other IA people. It's always sort of a thrill in this market where there's just not as many of us. So I love helping people find each other in that way.
This is my privilege. Of course, I spend a lot of time talking to your colleagues in admissions, but just wish that candidates had more access to you. There's a level of professionalism and commitment, warmth, encouragement, you know, the skills, the opportunities that you're then creating for these individuals to spread their wings and achieve great things. I'm glad we're at least able to capture some of that on Zoom over the last hour. So to Ellen, to Abigail, to Matthew, David, and Steve, thank you for joining us for Center Court.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interact, and thanks again. Okay, bye everybody.